Rachel Reeves has just detonated a political bombshell that's sending shockwaves through the Labour Party, and it's about time we face the harsh realities of what that means for the future of British politics. Keir Starmer's darkest secret isn't just some petty gossip. It's a potential game-changer that could redefine the landscape for years to come. The party is stumbling, and their leadership is looking increasingly shaky. This isn't just about politics. It's about the lives of ordinary people who are feeling betrayed by the very party they thought would protect them. What exactly did Reeves reveal? Her recent policy decisions have left a trail of confusion and anger among Labour supporters. Remember the grand promises of economic reform and social protections? They now seem to evaporate quicker than a politician's sincerity on election night. Take the inheritance tax debacle, for instance. Imposing this tax on agricultural estates worth over £1 million has sent rural communities into a frenzy. Farmers view it as a direct assault on family-run farms that have been passed down through generations. This isn't just about individual livelihoods, it's about the entire agricultural industry feeling the squeeze while the government turns a blind eye. Reeves tries to defend this move as a fair contribution to the economy, but fair for whom? Certainly not for the families who have worked their land for decades only to face the prospect of losing it all to the taxman. And let's not ignore the other unexpected tax hikes that Reeves keeps rattling on about. She's constantly talking about a £40 billion black hole in public finances, using it as a catch-all justification for these draconian measures. But is it really about fiscal responsibility, or is it merely a convenient excuse to push through broader tax increases that betray pre-election promises? Reeves herself has acknowledged that the fiscal position they've inherited is dire and that there's no way to fix it without some pain. Fair enough. But where's the transparency in Labour's fiscal strategy? More importantly, who's really paying the price for these necessary decisions? The responsible thing, she claims, is to protect working people. But how can they claim that when their policies are actively harming the most vulnerable among us? As we dig deeper, the relationship between Labour and major unions is beginning to fray. Union leaders are pushing back against cuts to social protections, including the winter fuel payment for pensioners. It's starting to look like a game of political chess, with vulnerable groups treated as mere pawns. Former Home Secretary Priti Patel didn't hold back, accusing Labour of prioritising union interests over the needs of pensioners and working families. The opposition is crying foul, hurling accusations of deceit at the government. When looking at Labour's economic vision, one glaring issue emerges. They've chosen to levy taxes on employers, leaving it up to those employers to absorb the costs. It's disingenuous to pretend this won't affect working people. The gap between pre-election promises and post-election realities is widening, and the human cost of these tough choices is becoming increasingly evident. While Labour talks about making hard choices, pensioners are facing life and death decisions. How did a party that vowed to protect the vulnerable end up effectively signing a death warrant for the elderly? Enter Margaret, a 75-year-old retiree from Sheffield. She's lived in her modest home for decades, budgeting her pension to make ends meet. But this winter, she faces a terrifying choice: heat or eat. "I'm worried sick about how I will pay my heating bills," she confides, her voice trembling. It's a nightmare scenario for countless pensioners across the UK. Labour's decision to slash winter fuel payments is set to impact millions, and the move, aimed at saving £1.5 billion annually, leaves many wondering at what cost. Energy bills are soaring, with the price cap expected to hit £1,700 per year starting in October. For pensioners on fixed incomes, this spike is catastrophic. The Fuel Poverty Coalition warns that many will need to find an additional £500 just to keep their homes warm this winter. Yet, while they cut support for the elderly, other spending decisions raise eyebrows. This stark contrast isn't lost on voters or even Labour MPs themselves. Constituents are voicing their outrage, and party members are scrambling to justify the unjustifiable. Increased fuel poverty isn't just a matter of comfort, it's a matter of life and death. Health risks for the elderly skyrocket when they can't afford to heat their homes properly. Hypothermia, respiratory issues, and exacerbation of existing health conditions become very real threats. The irony is palpable. The party that once stood for the vulnerable is now leaving them out in the cold. As dissent grows within Labour ranks, the political fallout is impossible to ignore. Former Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell has hinted at the need for a rethink, emphasising the party's obligation to address pensioners' concerns. This is a sign that even within the party, there's a dawning realisation that this policy isn't just unpopular, it's potentially disastrous. The question remains, can Labour course correct before it's too late? As winter approaches and energy costs continue to rise, the clock is ticking for millions of pensioners like Margaret. What was meant to be a tough but necessary choice might just prove to be their undoing. Labour's economic approach is riddled with contradictions. They promised to protect the vulnerable, yet pensioners are now facing dire choices between heating and eating. They pledged economic reform, but their policies have led to the highest tax burden since World War II. So where does this leave left-wing politics in Britain? Can Labour reconcile its roots with these harsh realities, or have they strayed too far from their core values to win back disillusioned voters? One thing's clear, we need to scrutinise political promises more closely. It's not enough to take campaign pledges at face value. We must demand transparency, challenge inconsistencies, and hold our leaders accountable, regardless of party affiliation. Only then can we hope to bridge the growing gap between political rhetoric and economic reality.